Test 1, 2. It works. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our hope and salvation. Amen. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the whole earth. Sing to the Lord and bless his name. Proclaim the good news of his salvation from day to day. The opening words of Psalm 96, I thought were pretty apt this morning as I was reflecting on Stephen's offer. Can you hear me okay?
No.
Okay. Is it when I turn down?
No, you just need to stick to the back of the room.
No problem. Thanks, Stephen. So just a little background story. I was at a wedding, long, late wedding last night, so great wedding. Just need to get the energy off a little bit. Two very good friends, so reason to celebrate and celebrate with vigor. So when reflecting on Stephen's offer to share with you the experience of NCD here at Holy Trinity Guildwood and what you have shared through participating in the survey, I thought the words of Psalm 96 were rather appropriate. This sense of the majesty, the wonder of God, who God is, and the possibility that we might draw close both in worship and in relationship. So I'm going to try to hit a couple things this morning. The first one is to talk about the results that we shared. I think there's a lot to celebrate, and we've had some really good discussions so far. Stephen, myself, Pat, there we are, Pat's over there. And so just to share some of that, to share some thoughts, to open just an opportunity to maybe if you have a couple of questions. And then if there's time, I might even be persuaded to pull my guitar out, if you're okay with that. So bear with me. So the results of the survey indicated that there was a really strong sense of fellowship and service in this parish, particularly around themes of teamwork, affirmation, and releasing. There was a real sense that there was a spirit of joy and laughter, that folks trusted each other, and there was a depth of community and the possibility to experiment in this church. Let me tell you, I have the gift to visit a wide diversity of parishes in the Diocese of Toronto. It's been a real pleasure coming to hang out with you folks and getting to know and sharing a little bit of community. So I think that experience of the depth and richness of what Holy Trinity Guildwood is really came across in the results that we were unpacking in what you shared in the survey. The opportunities for growth were in some areas of spirituality. The three top ones were thinking about themes of everyday faith in, of course, our changing cultural context in which we do church. Themes of hope, so thinking about what and who we have hope in, and the one that was indicated in the survey was prayer, and so an experience of prayer in the sense of when we gather outside of Sunday morning when we're all facing forward. How do we pray and how do we share prayer together in the smaller sense of community? How do we pray for each other? And what does prayer look like in our own individual lives? So I thought that the texts this morning were actually quite apt. I was thinking about the three texts actually and how they kind of wove together. So in 1 Kings, we have this story of Elijah and the prophets of Baal. We have these altars. There are animals being killed. There's blood, burnt offerings, pretty real, vigorous kind of images of ancient times. This sense that we require these altars to draw close to God, for us to experience God. And then in our gospel story, we have in Luke chapter 7, this story of the Roman centurion and of Jesus, the centurion being the military arm of the Roman Empire, the military arm of that force that is ruling this foreign land, that is ruling those who call themselves the people of God. However, this centurion maybe is a little different. He is seen as a friend of God. But even in that space, a friend of God and someone who participates in the building of the local synagogue and in helping the local Jewish people out, this invitation of Jesus, he says, I am not worthy. I am not worthy for you to come to my house. So there is that sense of still experiencing some tension in drawing close to God. Jesus responds, with those words, not even in Israel have I found such faith. He really sees something beautiful in this centurion, and while wrestling in his own life, obviously holding a position of imperial power, recognizing something of God's work in the breadth of creation, in this strange foreign people, there is still a sense that it's not quite coming together. But there's still space for some really profound work to happen, and we have this story of healing. And then in the beginning of Paul's letter to the Galatians, these beautiful opening words, this sense that Paul is speaking through Jesus Christ, the God and Father who raised him. There is the sense of a gospel of freedom, radical freedom in Jesus, and the freedom for us to experience God in such a close and intimate way. There's a sense that in this story of what it means to connect with the divine, to connect with God, and of course the many ways that we do, that something very different has happened in this experience and story of Jesus. So if we bring it back to the NCD results, thinking about prayer, I suspect that it weaves a little bit with these three texts. In the sense that prayer is really about, if we think of those words when the disciples ask Jesus, teach us how to pray. Jesus says, say, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Our Father. There is this idea that through Jesus, we actually have the possibility of drawing close to God. There's this sense that in this funny way, the story of how human beings engage with God, these images of altars and animals being sacrificed and all this stuff, there's this sense that something different is happening, and we actually have the possibility of standing in the place of Jesus. So prayer becomes something about lenses, perhaps, and language. Being able to grow in prayer is something about being able to grow in faith with the words of the Lord's Prayer. We think that there is the possibility to actually grow into the ministry that Jesus paints in forgive us our debtors forgive our debts as we forgive those who owe us. There's the possibility for radical new life to come out as we are called into relationship with God. So I thought that it was really interesting that the texts sort of lay some of those things out. And I think in our discussion, Pat and Stephen, sorry, I love being in a group with two Pats. I'm a big fan, but it's fun. One of the things that we were sharing was just reflecting on the nature of what it means to be church at this time and place, when maybe going to church is not the socially normative thing to do. But there is still a sense that we can experience God, that we can draw close to God in community and also in our own individual lives. So one of the things that we talked about is in growing in prayer and growing in faith, perhaps there are different ways that we can grow in prayer. And so thinking about the diversity of Anglican tradition and Anglican tradition of prayer. If we talk about the kind of spirituality as this Natural Church Development understands it, there is an incredible breadth and depth of spiritual tradition, many spiritual traditions across Anglicanism. The sense of growing in faith and growing in health is that we have the possibility in these traditions, these many traditions, to live out those traditions with commitment and with fire and enthusiasm. Because those traditions that we bring, the many traditions, for example, around prayer or liturgy, they come from an experience of God actually working in communities, an experience of God and working in people's lives. And why should they not come alive again? So, in our conversation, we talked about this being something that many churches actually find very challenging today. And if many thoughtful Christians and thoughtful churches have wrestled with how to make this real. I'd tell a little story. I was visiting a church to the east of here, and they had an experience of outside of Sunday morning, they found prayer to be a bit of a challenge, and so they said, okay, what are we going to do? This is a church in tradition, probably we would identify as fairly liberal Catholic. And so the wardens and other lay leaders got together and they said, well, let's perhaps we should start maybe some kind of a conspiracy of prayer. It's kind of fun little language. And so to try little experiments of, if we gather in a circle for, a drama meeting, or if we gather in a circle to prepare some music, what does it look like for us to experiment and to try out new language and to try out new experiments in community around prayer. So that was one of the things that we suggested as a possibility. I wonder if Stephen, you might want to add something, and then we could maybe open it up for questions.
As we're honoring Peter today in his ministry, of course it makes me think of Vivian. And Vivian was such a woman of courage. And I remember maybe the first or second year we're here, she's leading the parish nurse ministry, and she says, we're going to people's homes and we don't know how to pray for them. And that was, I think, a kind of a shocking moment of enlightenment, and yet it started all of us on our path to saying, if we said, well, the government works, but really the government isn't quite doing what it ought, we try to push the government along. Or if you go to the medical system and it's not quite doing what it ought, we try to help it along. So if the church can't yet quite pray, this is our job to say, this is our church and we can help it along. And so we began that journey. Really started by Vivian and did a lot of work with the sisters and those of you. And not surprisingly, it's a theme that keeps on repeating itself. We have come a long way, and yet we still have a way to come. So let me give two quick vignettes. I would hope that if I was visiting your home and said, I'm about to get married, and I'm so excited, and yet I'm a bit nervous, would you pray for me? That every one of you could pray for me then and there and not say, I have to get a book, or let me go research this for an hour, I'll come back and do a prayer for you. I mean, it's such a simple request. I'm about to get married. Or somebody you love here, and you're in their room, and you're visiting them, and maybe they've just had a bad medical diagnosis, you're at their bedside. I would expect that you could, on the spot, no book required, just from your heart, pray for them. And if you're a typical Anglican, you're going, I'm not so sure I could do that. We want to work into that. Or the second, as I say, I got some great news. There's no sermon today. You're going to have 10 minutes to be quiet and just go deep in the presence. And I would expect everyone could go, oh, wonderful. I'm going to have 10 minutes to bask. And if we're going, I have no idea what I'll do with 10 minutes of silence in the church. So these are just a couple. So, David, do you have anything you want want to ask David about what we know, loving relationships so well, still learning to grow in prayer, faith, and hope. And Pat, seeing that you're the ringleader, and I want to thank her so much for leading the NCD study. Maybe you want to join in this too.
Any questions? And I can do my best to answer them.
The
Yes, sir.
passionate spirituality has improved, but by how much? Roughly by percentage
well,
or whatever.
so,
Almost double.
Oh, very good.
Not quite.
Great news.
So it's gone up since first engaging with NCD back in 2009. It has gone up, almost double. Yeah, like 20 or so points. And I think in our discussion, the surveys showed that. So what the folks who took the survey, what they put down on paper, that indicated that was their experience of community and of faith here at Holy Trinity Guildwood. And that also came out in our discussion, kind of reflecting on what people had shared through the mechanism of the survey. Yes?
I wrote down something you said, I just wanted to keep a comment.
Sure, I'll do my best.
We have a possibility of standing in the place of Jesus. What please do you mean by that?
So it's really interesting and I'm no expert theologian, but I've talked to a few that are smarter than I am, and there is the sense that in those opening words when the disciples say to Jesus, teach us how to pray, and Jesus says, you pray our Father. And so Jesus being the Son of God, there's some sense in which we are able to stand with Jesus to draw close to God, and almost like in the place of Jesus, and through his ministry, birth, and death and resurrection. And I don't know, it's kind of a beautiful image. Challenging, I think, but there is that sense in which there's a new way to draw close to the divine, to God.
Yes, and I think our work so far has been a gentle change. It hasn't been a dramatic change, but it's been a gentle improvement. And I think it has improved the life of the people here in the work that we've done. Diane?
So the survey says that we are a wonderful community, loving church, but we're not spiritual? Is that what I get?
No.
Yes. How can we not be spiritual?
Not at all. In fact, your scores, if we want to talk about numbers.
David?
Yes.
So from the back, we didn't hear Diane's question.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good question.
So, do you want me to try and repeat?
Yes. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. So Diane was saying, okay, so to say we're not spiritual, and I would say by no means. In fact, the scores, if we wanted to, because it's reflecting on the experience of church across Canada, and many Anglican parishes are included in that. Your scores are actually quite solid. What it's saying is that that's the area for growth. So in fact, the experience of relationality and of service in this parish very strong, and connecting it to some aspects of spirituality and faith. Those are opportunities to grow in. But it's not saying there's not life there, by absolutely no means. And I should say something too. So I have the gift of being able to visit with a broad diversity of parishes in this really big diocese, and also talk to folks in the wider church, across Canada, across North America. And this is by no means something that's unique to this parish. In fact, as our culture has changed in North America, so the place of the church in wrestling with what it means to be church, where it's maybe not the normal thing to do. That's actually a struggle that much of the church is going through. And I think there's a lot of really great growth that's happening as we figure out what it means to be church in this new world. And we have more growth opportunities to engage with. So that's kind of, it's not unique to this parish at all.
Very good.
Oh, sorry, you just blocked there.
Could you define what you're talking about when you refer to
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Internal, external?
sure. So, I would say there's two things. So one is growth ultimately is about health, right? So it's about the way we have the traditions and the story of the church throughout time, and we gather here in this building to be church and do church together. And as we do those things, we have habits and we have practices and all those things. So it's what it is saying is can we grow in health in our habits as we live out being church? So there is that sense of sort of a holistic, organic experience of that. It is connected to the numbers, so the numbers in the parish. And so what it's doing is it's looking at the experience of churches, in this case across Canada. A significant percentage of them Anglican, and in this diocese, about 120 Anglican parishes in the Diocese of Toronto. So it's saying that all things being equal, healthy, growing parishes have an experience of health in these categories. And so it's not about looking different, it's about figuring out how to grow in a category that's authentic to the tradition and local context of an individual parish. So you could have Anglo-Catholic, you could have liberal, you could have evangelical, saying we as church, how do we grow as this in a way that's authentic to who we are? Yeah.
To be very simplistic about it, are we saying that it's analogous to build it and they will come? Are we talking about numerical growth at all?
So it's saying that in our story, we believe in a God of abundance. We believe through the Holy Spirit that God is working in people's lives in many ways across our communities. And so when we attend to those things that characterize a healthy church, we have the possibility to receive and to steward God's gift. And that's partly about making disciples, right? Now, having said that, we recognize, of course, that our culture has changed. And we're going through a process of the church is kind of like figuring itself out again a little bit, in the sense of what it means to be church, where it's not, as to use the term, Christendom anymore. But the story that we live out and the story that we are doing our best to follow has deep relevance, I believe, for people's lives, for the joys, the pains, the struggles, and of communities, of individuals, and the beauty of the creation that we experience. So the numbers part is sharing the experience of growing churches across the diocese. And so I should say that churches, there are a fairly significant percentage of churches in the diocese that are growing, but it's, you're trying to figure out in your own neighborhood, what does it look like to be a healthy church. So the numbers part is a little bit subjective, but you're sharing experience. Yeah.
Is it safe to say then that if we can't improve our own health, we're never going to have the energy, the strength, the tools to reach out beyond our own health?
So it is about building capacity. So as a church, building capacity. So sorry about that. So about having the ability to experiment, to translate, to think about how do we as church address the concerns of our neighborhood, and address the many contexts that people are coming through. Maybe not knowing, for example, the stories that we read this morning. Can we creatively think about ways to communicate those stories to folks that we come in contact with? So as a church grows in health, it grows in capacity to address many of these things. And I could tell you a ton of stories in our own diocese as well, of churches that have done not miraculous change, but have addressed areas that they can grow in over 5-10 years, and have greatly increased their ability to do ministry in their own cities, towns, neighborhoods, etc.
If we don't take care of our own health, we run the risk of letting attrition take care of us.
But I think we're we're above average, you know, in all of the results. I mean, we are,
Top 15%.
yes, so we are
Of
we're
various,
a
yeah.
good group.
Yeah.
We're a good group. I
And
think with
the
this
results show
gentle
that.
change,
I think through this too, as we gain in strength ourselves,
Yeah.
I think without knowing it, as we meet other people, by example, I think it's picked up. So sometimes it's very difficult, I would think, to, you know, actually evaluate what you're doing. But I think, you know, in just kind of working on it yourself, you become maybe an example for others. And, you know, you don't have to, you know, make a big deal of it, but more by example in what you're doing.
Yeah.
your light shines a little brighter.
So with David, we've really probably sparked off a year's conversation where we'll be talking about prayer and spirituality as our opportunity, our greatest intentionality and our learning curve. And very quickly, you'll remember the bucket analogy, right? So it's saying there are 8 quality characteristics that make strong church. Think of them as the staves of a bucket. And the water will fill that bucket up to the level of the lowest stave. So if we want to grow as a healthy church, the best place to put our energy and time is in that lowest stave, because as the lowest stave, then the bucket. So you could have like 7 staves in the 90s, but if one stave is really low, the water is still going to leak out of the bucket. So we're working on that lowest stave. As Pat said, we've doubled since we began working on that about in 2009. And it's not to be ashamed of. I mean, we're in the top 15% of all churches in Canada that NCB has tested. We're a gorgeous community. And yet in today's culture, nothing happens by accident, right? If we want to pass on this jewel, we have to be intentional about our service and our health. There's going to be a bit of a jazz service in the sense that I purposely wanted David to have a bit more time. I'm going to let the creed take care of itself for next Sunday. If you miss the confession because you're feeling extraordinarily sinful, remember the Lord's Prayer says, "Forgive us our sins." So you will have done the confession when we get the Lord's Prayer. It's got a beautiful voice, and as the conclusion to this, just this little segment, I'd like David to sing to us, and then Peter, I'll be inviting you to come join me. Might you sing? Yeah.
I'd love to. Thank you very much, Stephen. I'm going to turn this off, if that's okay, and I'll try to project. I'll just do this. Thanks, though. So I was thinking about the themes that we...
Nice and loud, David.
Yeah, I was thinking about the themes that we discussed over the last few weeks and months, reflecting on the nature of community and church here at Holy Trinity Guildwood, and thinking about the themes of the scripture text that we read this morning. So I wanted to play a song. This is a song from a good friend of mine in Wales. He's a singer-songwriter. His name is Martin Joseph. It's Martin with a Y. Really gifted singer-songwriter, folk musician. This is a song I like to describe as somewhere between a love song and a gospel song. But it's about perhaps when life is challenging, there's a sense that when life is maybe not meeting all your expectations, still being able to draw close to what in Celtic spirituality they refer to as those thin places. This is a song called "Turn Me Tender." It's happened again. There's a colorless sky, it's dim me again, and I've run out of why. Hank Williams is grieving, I'm scanning the Psalms. When Jesus was here, they still echoed his palms, and the pledge and the vows you find if you seek. But what if you try and find nothing but bleak? Turn me tender again, fold me into you, turn me tender again, and mold me to new. When faith's lost its promise and bruised me deep, turn me tender again, through union with you. Let me lay with you now, like the very first time. I've had rooms full of dollars, but I'm down to a dime. Though there's wonder, there's ore in the mane of a lion, but there's nowhere to go. And I'm chapters from Zion, yet you're still my cryptic. You are my cherishing prayer, with serenity kisses that would soothe and repair. Turn me tender again, fold me into you, turn me tender again, and mold me to new. When faith's lost its promise and bruised me deeply, turn me tender again, through union with you. And laments, they have a purpose. Laments, they have a cost. It's a requiem playing. She will gather the lost. Well, it sometimes tastes sour, all this sweetness and hope, when the blizzards keep raging on this lover's slope. Yet I don't want to freeze here, inside or out, for it's you that dissolves all my cold walls of doubt. Turn me tender again, fold me into you, turn me tender again, and mold me to new. When faith lost its promise and bruised me deep blue, turn me tender again. Turn me tender again, fold me into you, turn me tender again, and mold me like new. Faith's lost its promise and bruised me deep, turn me tender